Welcome to the May version of Guitar Brigade. We're glad you're all here with us tonight. We got another great crowd. Thank you all for coming. Okay, so learning the fretboard. Some strategies we're gonna use tonight, using patterns and some simple math. Just doing a few things like that can greatly assist us in learning the notes on the fretboard. So our agenda looks like the first rhetorical question is, why bother to learn the notes on the fretboard at all? What good is it going to do me? So I don't know if any of you are in that boat. Why should I learn the notes on the fretboard? So we're going to talk about why it is important to eventually learn the notes on the fretboard, reasons to learn the fretboard, and importance of patterns. We're going to talk a little bit about knowing the notes helps you, and if you're improvising, you can take a look at power chords. And we're going to see where, remember our session on triads. Well, triads are going to come into play here too, because once we find the root note, we can build our triads off the next root note that we find using the patterns. So okay, so why learn the notes on the fretboard? Technically, you don't have to, but you should at least know the notes on the low E and the A string. You can go a long way with just knowing the notes on the low E and the A string. And it depends on what you want to do. I mean, if you like playing like the open D and G and A, and you don't have an interest in playing different things or moving up and down the fretboard, that's totally fine too. But if you want to explore a little bit more than that, this is going to help you out going down the road. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we move chord shapes across the fretboard, and you can see that'll enlighten a lot of things too, just how you take a simple chord shape and move it down the fretboard and what you can do with that. Okay, the first thing is take the chromatic scale. I mean, if you want to start with something simple, you could take the chromatic scale and start learning your notes that way. I mean, you know that you're like on the high E string. If you start with E and then you go F, and you don't have start off without doing sharps or flats. So just do the natural notes first. So you can do E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. And say the notes like as you're picking them, so to help you learn the notes. And then test yourself after you go do that and say, okay, what fret was my C note on? Oh man, where's the C note? 8th fret. So, okay, but where did the A note go? 5th fret. So test yourself after you do that, and then do that for each string, and that'll help you familiarize yourself with each one of the notes on each string. So say you wanted to say, if you're asking yourself, where on the fretboard can I play a D chord? Okay, well, we know where we can play it, up here, but we can play it here. We can play it down here. We can play it in a lot of different places. So, and that will help you, like if you're playing with like a group of people or a couple people, and you can play different chords and different positions on the neck, and it will fill out the sound. So, but let me get to an example. Okay, and this example is going to use the F note because that'll give me the most real estate across the fretboard. So knowing your notes on the low E string, we know that the F note is where on the low E string. We know it is first fret, low E string. Okay, so this pattern says if you slide down 2 frets and move down 2 strings, that's your next root note, F. So we go from F to F. And the next pattern, you can do this a couple different ways. If you slide down 2, down 2, and over 1, you have another F note. But I recently discovered there's an easier way to do that. If you just slide down 3 and down 2, you'll come to the F note there. Okay, and then to get to the next F, well, where's the next F? So we got F, A, we have one here. So if you take, okay, from there, you can also do this from the A string. That's why it's important to know your notes on the A string.
Hey, Dave,
Yes.
could I just clarify, if you go, I'm looking at your diagram, and the very first red F on number 1, that would be us fretting the low E string on the first fret.
Correct.
And when you say down 2 or over 2, you're referring to the fret numbers, or not the fret numbers, but the frets you want them to move?
Yes, correct. Thanks, Paul. Yes, move 2 frets. Like if I'm on the F note, move 2 frets.
So I've just moved my F from the first fret to the third fret. I went
Third fret.
up towards the sound hole, and then I'm going to come down 2 strings, not 2 frets.
2, thank you. Yes, 2 strings to the third fret on the D string to get to your next F.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah. So from this F, then you would move down 3 frets, 1, which would put you on the 6th fret on the D string, move down 2 strings to the B string, and that will be your next F note. Okay. Similarly, you can do this from the A string as well. You would find where the F note is on the A string. That's why it's important to know the notes on the A string. So let's see, where is our F note on the, I think it's right there on the 8th fret. So if you start on the A string on the 8th fret, it's the same principle that applies here. If you move down 2 frets to the 10th fret, move down 2 strings to the 10th fret on the G string, that is your next root note, F. And then if from there, you would slide down 1, 2, 3 frets to the 13th fret and down 2 strings to the 13th fret on the high E string, and lo and behold, that's another F note. So using this pattern, you can do this for any note. The same pattern applies to any note that you want to find.
And Dave, what if we have someone that says, well, I understand you're showing me a pattern, but how do I know that on the 8th fret of the A string that that's an F note?
Well, you could use your chromatic scale for one thing. If you take the on the A string, you could go A, E, C, D, E, F. That's one way you can find it.
Perfect. So yeah, starting with the open string because we do know the names of those, hopefully.
So so you can always bounce back to the chromatic scale. It's a big helping aid for when you need to go back and find a note, particular note on your fretboard. So that it's a good tool to have in your toolbox. Is there any questions on that so far?
No, we have an observation from Rich who said, isn't it kind of all about intervals versus notes? And I think that's a really wise observation because before we let you all in the waiting room, Dave and I were just talking about the different ways we learn this great instrument, and we're still learning it. And I think there are some of those that are more geared towards hearing and knowing the notes on the fretboard based on the distance between the intervals versus the notes. So for example, we were saying you could have some professional guitarists that can pick up a guitar and improvise instantly over any key, in part, not because they know where to press an F note or a G note, more so because they know what the interval sounds like from a 1 to a 4 or 1 to a 6, and they're reproducing the sound of that interval they want on the fretboard. So I think there's a lot of different ways to approach learning the fretboard. It could be real intimidating if it's just about memorization without any why or any reason. And I will say I'm not good at memorization. It's just not anything that motivates me. I've been playing for decades. If I would have just sat down and memorized them, I would have had them all by now. But it comes to me, I don't know if it's intervals. I think I might lean that way more, but it comes to me more in chord shapes, and we'll talk about that later.
Great, thanks for that observation.
Michael wants to know, of course, you can share this PowerPoint with your local chapter. All of this material is to help vets learn whether it's in cyber or not. And if you need to download it, it's in the community.
Yes, this is out on the CAVARTS site under this event, so it's available. So,
Yeah, and if
okay.
any of you have trouble finding it, just DM me. Sometimes it's could get easy to get lost in CAVARTS.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is we're going to have to go back in our memory banks and remember our session on triads a little bit to do this. So we're going to follow the same diagram that we did before, but for each root note, we're going to try to figure out how would you build that chord based on where that root note is. So for instance, if we take the F chord here, well, there's a couple different ways we could play it, but you have to know, we know a triad is based on your 1, 3, and 5 notes. So we know we have an F as the root, and then we have an A as the third, and then we have a C as the fifth. So if we use that, we can make one voicing, or I should say one F chord. That's an F chord. It's an F, A, and C. And then if we move down 2 frets, down 2 strings, now we have an F note here. So now what we have to do is we have to find our A and our C notes from here. So anybody want to take a guess, or they know, I'm sure some of you already know this, but how could we make an F chord from here? We can make it like F, A, C. So we can make it like that. Or now if we go to the next root note, down 3 frets, down 2 strings, and then how are we going to make an F chord from there. This is the root on the 6th fret B string. Okay. Well, it just so happens this.
Okay, the 5th fret C and A. 4th fret C and A, 6.
Is that
fifth,
Mr. Dave Youter?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That's it. Yeah. Yep. You got the C on the 5th fret G string. You have the A note on the 5th fret high E string. And our root note is on the 6th fret B string. And the other interesting thing about this is you notice here, the one that I played here, it looks like you're playing a C chord, doesn't it? That's called the C shape. This is going to be something we're going to talk about down the road. This is going to be a D-shaped chord. So, and see how the tone changes and the color changes of that F chord. So it depends where you play it on the neck. So same chord, you're playing an FAC note. So it's an F. Okay, so this is the F that we came down to from the 1st fret low E, and then down to, and then we made an F chord, and it's an F chord in the C shape. It's almost like an F major 7th, but that's, and then if we come down 3, 1, 2, 3, down 2, we are going to make an F chord. In the D shape on the 5th and 6th frets there. So now, if you know this, you can take any of these anchor points where there's an F note, and you can try it out yourself. You can try it, go to one of the root notes and see if you can build a chord from there. And the beauty part about it is it can be any chord. It's not any chord. It's not just F. It works for any of them. So say somebody told you to build an F sharp chord and said, "Oh my God, I don't know how to build that." So, well, you can just by using the same pattern, just starting on the 2nd fret low E string, which is an F sharp. So you have to know your notes on the low E. Down 2, down 2. So the same principle applies no matter which chord you're trying to build. It's just helpful, like when you're trying to put chord progressions together. It really helps to have this in your back pocket to know how to do this. So,
Hey, David.
yes, sir.
Robert Miller, shout out from Findlay, Ohio, is saying, is Dave holding down both the E and B strings when doing the C-shaped F chord?
No, just
The E string is open. You reference it as an F major 7, so the E string would be open.
But if I wanted to, yes, good question. I could actually do fret both of those. The F note, I would have to fret also the 1st fret to get that F in there.
We can't see your hands, buddy.
Whoop.
There you go. Thanks.
Yep. So, and then I just put a slide up just to demonstrate what a few of those that I just showed you.
And so that last one, oops, sorry, that last one that starts on the 5th fret, that's kind of your D-shaped. We were asked earlier, we're going to talk about the cage system, and I said probably only in passing, just because that's a topic we could go very deep on. But so that would be kind of the D shape that we're seeing in that last slide. Is that right?
Yes, actually, the C shape, the D shape, this is kind of a very top level introduction to the cage system. Those are cage shapes, but that's another topic for another day. So, but
It does get confusing when we use the words chord and when we use the word shape, and we're calling that mess, that hot mess on the 5th and 6th fret, a D-shaped F chord. We're saying it's D-shaped because if you imagine this all moved down to your 2nd fret, you would actually be playing a D chord because you're very familiar with that D shape. But the shape doesn't say what the chord is, because the shape could be moved. So as soon as you make a D chord and you move it up 1 fret, it's a D sharp. When you move it up another fret, it just keeps going until we get to the F, where we have that root on the 6th fret.
that's, yeah, thanks, Paul. That's a good lead in to, I think we're going to talk about the movable shapes. So when we do this, like knowing our triads and knowing our notes will help us do that. So like Paul was just mentioning, if you play a D, we know from our triad session that we have the 1, 3, and 5 notes in that D. So we have an A, we have an F sharp, and we have a D. If we slide that down 2 frets, still the same shape, but it's an E chord now. And then we go up our scale to F. It's an F chord. I haven't changed the shape. I'm just moving it down. To move it down 2 more, and that's a G chord. And again, you can take other shapes, like say our A chord. If you move that down 2 frets, that becomes a B chord. Slide it up to the 5th fret using that A shape. You have a C chord, and subsequently down the line, you move it to the 7th fret, you have a D chord. Now, when you do it this way, you have to be careful just to play those particular strings. And sometimes when we play it like this, we actually move our index finger to come up to get the bass note when we do this. Or you can bar it. But the point of this is so that you know that there is shapes that you can move up and down the fretboard, and they create different color, or we call them voicings. They're called voicings, and we'll get into that in another session too. But so that's the shape. And I think it's just about time that I turn this over to Paul. I think, unless there's some questions, any questions?
Yeah, timely. Danny Smith just said that he's got a nice little exercise he's started using for triads, and I'm hoping Danny will unmute and let us know what that is.
And so I'm just playing those scale notes in there. And I'm hitting my G triads, and then I could do the same thing using the D shape. And I know that by playing this, I'm calling this the F shape. I'm calling this the D shape because it looks like a D chord. This looks like half of an F chord. Makes it a G because I'm up 2 frets, like Dave said. And then so if I started on my D shape, Then I know that after the D shape here is an A shape. And then after my A shape, it goes right back to that G shape or that F shape. So I got D shape, A shape, and F shape. And so I've been using just those three shapes for my triads for now as I learn. There's obviously the G shape, the A shape, the G shape, the E shape, and the D shape, and the C shape. But those three shapes that I've been using have been really helpful for me finding my triads and knowing where I can play my, in that scale. And then I can use the scale that corresponds with that shape. And if you look up the cage system and you just look at the scale that's in the A shape, you got that. That would be the A shape scale playing in the G range.
So this is a great example, Danny, of the message I want when we're talking about learning the fretboard is there isn't one right way to do it. And
True.
we will be drawn we'll be drawn by different things to learn it. So for some people, it's going to be about memorizing the notes. For some people, it's going to be scale based. For some people, it might be interval based. Some combination thereof. It might be chord based. And the whole idea is, what Dave started this presentation off with is why? Why do I need to know the notes on my neck? And obviously, a beginning guitar player doesn't. I would say an intermediate and advanced guitar player might not need to know and memorize the notes of their neck fretboard. But the idea is if you're growing and expanding, obviously learning the different notes helps in so many different ways. So if you're interested in improvising or soloing, being able to know where to go and where the safe notes are is about knowing the fretboard. And again, you can attack that by intervals or attack that by notes, but you have to be fluent and not be thinking about, do I slide past this note because I'm not sure if it's going to be sharp or flat, and just pass through it really quickly, or do I know that this is the sound that I want? It's also very helpful if you're a songwriter to pick out melodies and kind of know, just as scales would be helpful. But it really does help as a rhythm guitarist that plays with another rhythm guitarist. I'm very chord based, so knowing the notes up the neck in chord shapes is what makes sense to me. It's what I gravitate to. So while I say I don't sit down and memorize it, I'm just going to share with you a learning that I just had in prepping for Dave's presentation. One of the things we put in the community was a link to a website where a guy says you could learn the fretboard in 16 days using this system. And if you go to his website, his system basically is a cross hybrid of a lot of what we talked about. Some of it is memorization, and he starts with the natural notes. And then he has you looking at these octave patterns that Dave was showing, 2 down, 2 over, and knowing the notes on the E and the A string, wherever you are using the chromatic scale, you could then use that octave system and name the notes on the strings lower than it. But one of the things he said was there's only a few frets that if you look down the notes from the low E string to the high E string are natural notes. So if we go to the 5th fret, and I were just to name the notes on the 5th fret, the individual notes on my 5th fret, I have my low E string is an A if I'm fretting it on the 5th. I have a D, a G, a C, an E. So I'm fretting my B string on the 5th fret, so that's my E. And then I come back, because we always know if we're fretting the same fret, that I'll come back to an A string. So all of the notes, and it's only 2 frets, 3 if you count 12, but the 5th fret and the 10th fret and the 12th fret have the natural notes on it. And when I was looking at the pattern of E, D, G, C, E, A, what I did was kind of see, well, I know that my bar chord, now they call this an E-shaped, because if I'm down on my 1st fret, there's my E. And if I walk it up to the chromatic scale to my 5th fret, there's my bar chord A, but it's my E shape. But I kind of like, well, I know that that is a an A chord because this is my A bar chord. And the next note is a D. Well, I know that's a D because my D bar chord, so my A-shaped D. So A, and yes, I'm making an A chord, but I'm talking about that note. That's how I think about that note. When I think about this note, I think about my D chord here. So it's almost, I can make a chord. Here's a G. It's a kind of weird G, but this is actually a G chord. So A, D, G, I just make chords out of it. So I know that my C chord down here, that's actually the C note. Just like in my A chord, this is my root. So if I'm making it now, if I'm memorizing the strings on the 5th fret, A, D, G, C, I'm thinking my A-shaped C bar chord. And then the final one we get to is the 5th fret. And Dave showed that if you take your D and move it up to a D sharp to an E, well, now I'm fretting the 5th fret. So that was a lot of words just to say, when I looked at the natural notes down there, I didn't like, and the guy's advice was, so memorize these natural notes. Well, I don't think I need to because I kind of see the chord shapes, and these same chord shapes will work now anywhere up the neck. So if I wanted to know what the notes were going down on the C, I'd have to obviously be aware of my sharps and flats, but I can use the same E-shaped bar chord. There's my C, and I could follow that down to my A-shaped bar chord with that note, and that's my F. And so it's really what works for you. And maybe a combination of different things will work for you. So it's all good. I mean, we say there's not one wrong way to learn this. Any questions on that before we move to finger picking?
I just want to say that really makes sense when I've always called it the F shape, but it's actually the E shape, and that makes a lot of sense.
So Danny,
That's
that's kind of poking at the caged issue. The caged system says all the open shapes you can make on the guitar are C, A, G, E, D. And absent from that, if you think of our natural notes, are the F chord and the B chord. And that's because the F chord steals the E shape and the B chord steals the A shape. So they don't have their own open chord shape like a C or a D or a G does because they're borrowing from other chord shapes. And that's why when they move chord shapes up the neck, you don't hear them talk necessarily about I'm moving my F chord shape up or my B chord shape up because they come from the E and the A chord shape. Sure appreciate what you're doing, and please tell us in the community what you want us to work on next month. We hope you're enjoying the brigade. We really kind of wanted to think about, okay, now that you graduated, you got some skills, what would be, which way do you want to go? And so we have a couple paths for you in the community through singing and playing, through playing with others, through the toolkit. But we really are using the brigade to kind of duct tape and patch up all those areas that you think you might need some help with. So
Thank you all for coming.
appreciate you all. Thank you. Have a good night. Oh, I love it, Michael. Michael's got the fireworks going. Take care.
Night.